Thanks, Connor, for joining me today. And yeah, no, it's great. Again, this is another kind of, last week I had somebody on from Berlin. This week I have somebody on, is it Tenerife you're in at the moment?
Yeah, I'm in Tenerife now, but I'm from Clonlara, so just outside Limerick originally.
So, yeah, even when I sent you on the message, like, where in the world are you as well? So maybe, yeah, if you want to tell people maybe a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure, mate. So I'm I'm 35. I'm from, as I said, Clonlara originally. I've been coaching for 12 years, but I've actually lived out of Ireland for 10 years, or it's actually my 11th year. So I was played a lot of GA growing up, got a lot of injuries into my 20s, so my body was really just very much just breaking down. Like, and I was very anxious about being able to do my work as a personal trainer, was kind of looking at the horizon. Like, I wasn't even 30 and I was feeling very, very much like it was only downhill. So I got into yoga. I left Ireland. I went to India and Thailand for 2 years. I did hatha yoga and I actually ended up teaching English and hatha yoga in Thailand, in Khon Kaen, in the northeast of the country. And then after that, I moved to Australia and I kind of continued the mobility, flexibility side of things. I got qualified with, they're called GMB.io. So they're one of the most, I would say, like, I'm biased now because I'm a lead trainer with them, but they're one of the most respected organizations in the world for mobility training. So they've been around a long time now, like 15 years in the online space is a very long time. And then basically I opened up my own business in Melbourne in 2016 and have been coaching people since. And I moved completely remote in 2020 because gyms closed. So yeah, that kind of brings you up to present day. Now I'm back in Europe, so I'm based in Romania, but I'm in Tenerife at the moment.
Holy crap! Like it's like a world tour basically. So no, it even sounds like you, like with even the yoga side of things, you really did almost go to the source for it. You really, it was you when you went on almost a deep dive of the discipline.
Yeah, like, so just like yoga was, because like when you think of, I didn't know anything about stretching, flexibility. I just thought of yoga. I was actually doing Bikram yoga in Limerick for like a month, and then I went to India and I didn't know anything about yoga. I actually ended up in Mysore, and for people who don't know anything about yoga, Mysore is where Ashtanga yoga was created. So just very lucky that I just landed in this like yoga mecca. And that was kind of the start of it. And then when I got to Australia, I got much more into Ido Portel, which would be kind of like movement culture. He would have done some work with Conor McGregor. So everyone, I'm sure, knows Conor McGregor. And that kind of started me down the rabbit hole. And now what I'm really focused on is learning from people who are much older, like people like, so my mentor Ryan Hurst from GMB Fitness, he's 50, he moves, he's a ninja basically, and he's 50. So I'm like, wow, that's kind of the type of position I want to be in when I'm 50. I had Steve Maxwell on my podcast yesterday. Steve Maxwell is 71. He's a BJJ black belt. He trained the first of the Gracies who won the UFC years ago. So proper like
Yeah.
OG in the MMA space, like before MMA was even known. He was actually a shareholder in UFC when it started. Now he sold his shares and everything. So like he's still rolling. Like he was literally after our call yesterday, he went and rolled with guys in, 20, 30 year olds, 40 year olds, and he's 71. So like I've just been really focused on learning from people who are not just telling people stuff, they're actually physical embodiments of their systems for themselves and for their students as well.
No, actually, it's interesting you bring that point up in around kind of learning from people that much. Like you said, that they're practicing what they're preaching, but also they would definitely be in the senior years. Like I had a guest on before. He put together a book. It was basically a world tour of all the disciplines within mixed martial arts. And the one discipline he actually learned the most from was a 70-year-old Tai Chi instructor. Because he actually said it in the book. The reason I learned so much from Tai Chi is because we're so used to moving very fast and very quick movements. He said with Tai Chi it's the complete opposite, and he said it was actually more difficult because we're not trained to move these extremely slow movements but have your muscles tensed for such a long period. It was just so eye-opening from that point of view.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you're saying that because that's what Steve was talking about yesterday, and it's what GMB reference as well is like you need to master movements first, and you can't master movements if you're using momentum. Okay, so like you go to a HIIT class, you're jumping up and down off the ground, but three-quarters of those movements is you just falling and then exploding back up.
And your
So
heels
you actually
screaming
don't
at you within 20
exactly,
minutes.
exactly, yeah. So like especially for guys, like it's a hit to the ego when you have to like an example would be doing they're called clock-off squats. So clock-off is a world famous Russian weightlifter, and it's a 7 second lowering phase. So you've got a barbell on your back, you lower over 7 seconds. Now, actually 7 seconds, not 1 second. And then you pause at the bottom for 6 seconds, and then you explode back up. So like controlling every component of the movement, it's much better from an injury standpoint. It's actually much better for a strength development standpoint as well. But it's a hit to the ego initially because you're like, oh, I was doing 100 kilos, now I'm doing 40 kilos, you know? But yeah, like going slow is, and it's the same with habits, you know? So Dan John, another one of these legends, I talked to him a few months back. He was like, the long way is a shortcut, which I think is such a fantastic quote with everything, but in particular with health and fitness. Like it's that there's no hacks,
Yeah.
like there's no quick ways around it. Like it's building an exceptional foundation is how you get amazing results. Like that's basically it. And anyone else who's trying to tell you otherwise is lying to you.
Mm. And even like say you like, even like, I followed you on social for a long time now as well, and like your main focus in particular, it's on guys who are over 30. So like, given how big the market is for fitness and that, why was it, or what about this particular audience or just group was where you decided, yeah, this is definitely an area I'm going to focus on? Was it kind of from a personal, your own standpoint, or yeah, kind of how did you get to that decision?
Yeah, so like I just reflected a lot more. Like when I was working in person, you're limited by your postcode. So basically, if you just say I'm going to work with just like men over 30, you might have access to 20 guys, and of those 20 guys, two of them might want to train with you, and one of them might actually train with you. Whereas online, you've got access to a huge population, so you can really focus on one type of person online, which is great. So I just talking to my mentors at the time, I got really clear on who I thought I could help the most. And it was basically me from 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm.
So, like, I had chronic back pain for 4 years, in my late 20s, early 30s. And I know exactly what that process is like. I know what it feels like psychologically to feel like you might have to get a new job, like your confidence in your own physical ability is just completely destroyed. And that's why I started really focusing on that demographic online as well, because I could like really feel like I could help them much more. And I also understood that population a lot more because it's me, like it's me from a few years ago. So yeah, that's the reason why.
Yeah. And even say kind of as guys age, like how does their approach to fitness, how does it need to adapt? Like what are some of the considerations they need? Like I know a couple of people, it's like you need to be warming up for a lot more if you're playing like football and that. But what are some of the other areas they need to keep in mind for, like you said, having sustainable fitness over 30? Because for certain sports, it's kind of, oh, your career's at an end if you're at 30. But so, like, what are some of the key things they need to take into account?
I think the big one is like a lot of the times, myself included, can feel I'm 16 or I'm 18 and I can just, you know, one rep max go in and just smash myself. Um, so it was kind of almost a blessing in disguise for me because once I kind of got to 24, 25, that type of training just resulted in injuries instantly. Now, if you're someone who kind of got away with that a lot, once you're over 30, especially if you're over 40, your back, your hips, all this stuff is going to be going. Also, like being sore for 3 days is not very practical if you need to look after kids, if you need to do your job, if you want to be present with people and not just be in pain or worried about you sneezing and putting your back out. So
Jeez.
the yeah, yeah. And this isn't made up, this is from conversations with people. So the big thing is just like it's a hard one to get around sometimes if someone is very driven and they have a very, we'll say, type A personality, but like working at a much lower intensity than maybe what you're used to. But the way I explain it to people is like, let's just say a 10 out of 10 is maximal intensity. That's you pushing yourself to your limit. You're leaving everything on the gym floor. If you start working at between like a 6 to an 8 out of 10, now all of a sudden you can probably train tomorrow and feel pretty okay. You might have a little bit of stiffness, but you can train way more frequently and you feel better day to day as well.
Mm.
And like a good example for people listening would be like, let's just say you can do 10 chin-ups. Okay, that's a lot. Like if you can, well done. But just as an easy number to follow. So you go into the gym, you do 10 chin-ups. That's you're maxed out. You're smashed after that. So then you try and do another set. You rest for 2 or 3 minutes. On the next set, you can do like six. Okay. You're really, really exhausted. And then you've got one more set in you, and you can probably do four on the last set. Okay. Now, that's what kind of going to failure looks like for a lot of people. And then, of course, your risk is way up. Like the risk of your elbows, shoulders, neck, all these things go way up. So you've totaled 20 repetitions in your workout. It felt that was a 10 out of 10 workout. Like you absolutely smashed yourself. And you're sore for 2 or 3 days. So you can't really do much for the next at least 1 or 2 days. Now, in situation number two, you work at a 7 or an 8 out of 10 difficulty. So your first set, you do a set of 8. Then your second set, you do a set of 8. Your third set, you've gone to 7. You can actually do another set, 7, and then you do another set of 7. So now we have done 21 and then 16 is 37, I think. So on exercise session number two, it actually feels easier, but you've done 37 reps versus 20. So you've almost doubled your volume in the second session, and you can train tomorrow
Hmm.
because your recovery is way better. So you want to thinking about your training like that, always leaving 2 or 3 reps in the tank, even though you feel you could do more and maybe you might be used to doing more, you do less. Because what happens then in following this system, in 6 months, you've never been this strong in your life because you've been consistent for 6 months. In a year, you're at a completely different level.
Hmm.
In 2 years, you're doing stuff that you can't even imagine because you haven't broken the consistency cycle. So that's the way to think about your training is like, how can I be repeatable with what I'm doing? And it's technical failure as well, not complete failure.
Yeah.
So technical failure means that
You're not on the
I
ground
tech
dying.
exactly. So like I just can't, I can't
Yeah.
finish it with good technique. It's starting to my shoulders are lifting or it starts to look really ugly. You're done.
Hmm.
Um so just thinking about that like it is again, it's getting away from the 4 week challenge or I'm going to do X amount of push-ups or pull-ups for the month and looking at this as it's like you're brushing your teeth. Like you do it twice a day or you train, you move every day because it's just like it's a body maintenance thing. That's the way I think the more you can look at it like that, uh, and something you can repeat, then you will get like so much better results than you can even imagine. Like people are always saying to me, like, it took me a while to really, it felt very easy at the start, and now I can't believe how strong I am. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this stuff now. Like, I'm doing ring muscle ups, I'm doing handstands. I'm like, it doesn't make sense because it's easier than what I have done in the past. But the magic is in the past, you would do it for 6 to 12 weeks maximum and then stop for 8 months. Now you've done it for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 48 months.
It's like you said, it's the long way turns out to be the short way with it from that point of view. And like, do you even find kind of with that age group in particular, is time probably is that one of the biggest challenges they have? Because obviously, like if you're in your 20s, you like kind of you don't have as many commitments as you would say work, family, etc. Is time the biggest issue you find for most people, or how yeah kind of and if that's the case, then how have you found kind of ways to help them from the perspective of they're like, right, I have 2 or 3 kids, I only have like 30 minutes a day, help me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, kind of 30s, 40s, 50s, you're at your peak with kids and career tends to be, you're at your like best phase of like pushing your career forwards as well. So it's really challenging. And yeah, time is number one, and then energy is number two. So like the way I help people in this situation is what we actually do in the first week of the program is we go into planning and scheduling. That's what we focus on. Instead of saying like you need to eat these meals and get these workouts in, it's like actually let's look at the elephant in the room is how do we actually make this fit your routine and lifestyle? And everyone is like time poor, basically. So we get them to look at their schedule and we get them to see where they can fit in, usually 2 sessions a week. And I get people to think about it like if you were playing GAA or you were playing soccer, rugby, or had piano lessons. Like they weren't saying, okay, we're going to train on Monday at 7 a.m. and then Wednesday at 4 p.m. and then Friday at like 6 p.m. It was like Mondays and Wednesdays at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. That's when the training sessions are. So you want to kind of um, reduce decisional fatigue. We're all exhausted and kind of burnt out, and like we want to reduce as many decisions as you have to make. So if you can just look at your calendar, and for what works really well in my experience with clients is like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday at some time between 6 and 8 a.m., depending on when you need to leave the house. And that's your workout time, you know. If you've got kids, you talk to your spouse about like one of these watching making it work for you. This isn't going to work perfectly for everyone, but like the majority of people that tends to work. They have like this 30-minute slot, like let's just say on a Tuesday, Thursday at 7 a.m. They don't need to ask themselves, oh, should I do this today or can I fit it in today? It's like, oh, it's 7 a.m. This is what I do. And so that's the first thing is focusing on. And then we get them to plan their week as well. So like planning your week, planning your day, it's like you're kind of writing a contract to yourself every day, every week about like, okay, how do I want my week to look like? What would make this week a success? Another good question to ask yourself as well is like, okay, what are like 1 to 3 controllables that would make today amazing or would make tomorrow amazing? Because like usually if you're not feeling good psychologically, probably because you haven't done anything that you enjoy for a long time and you've got a lot more control over your time than you realize. But if you're on autopilot mode in the modern world, you're going to be over consuming social media and things like Netflix, over consuming junk food, and it's not necessarily your fault as an individual. That's just the way the environment is set up. Like it's set up to not move and to be constantly consuming like zero quality calories. So you need to take control of that and say, okay, how do I want my week and day to look like? Okay, I've got, my kids have this on at this time. I'm going to go for a walk during that time. Or I'm going to do my workouts in the morning and then it's the analogy of like putting on your own oxygen mask first, and then you've got more bandwidth for everyone. Like you're a better spouse, parent. You're more like one of the guys in the program. He lost like 25 pounds last year, but he also got 2 work promotions because he was way more productive and cognitively switched on, and his relationship with his wife is better as well. So like this stuff affects all parts of your life. Being physically active, it's not just about wanting to lose weight or fix your hip pain. Like it's such a performance enhancer for everyone.
Yeah. Oh no, that's one of the oxygen one. That's a good analogy as well. And it's kind of like when people kind of thinking like, oh, am I being selfish? It's like, well, I mean, if you're in bits or crippled, and that means you can't, like, for example, if you have kids, if you're struggling to pick your kids up, that again, it's looking at it from that perspective. It's also a good counter argument as well.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like I don't have kids, so I'm not like
Yeah.
I'm not coming from this from an angle like I know better or anything like that. I'm just talking like what's worked
Yes,
well
to
when
fit it
I've
around.
consulted with clients with kids. Yeah.
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 You mentioned the couple of mentions there in terms of like food and nutrition. Like obviously that's like you'll often hear that's the basic. It's a crucial foundation for fitness. Like what are you seeing as some of the key areas? Say not so much recommendations. What are some of the key areas with regards to nutrition that people are focusing on at the moment that's helped them to improve their health and fitness? Because again, we're at that time of year. I'm listening to some of the lads in work, and I seem to be the only one not on a diet.
Yeah, yeah. It's that again. Okay, so we'll look at it in 2 ways. One thing I want to touch on first that you just brought up there, and then we'll talk about nutrition, is this kind of cycle. So
Fads.
January and Mo what is it?
Fads or just trends, or kind of
Bad.
like it's almost like it's almost as if they're going, the fact they can say they're on a diet, it's almost like there's ego behind, I am doing this now, and you're going, okay, but anyway, continue.
Well, not even that. It's more like if you're always on a diet in January, chances are you're expecting that to
Mm,
happen. So the last quarter of the year, you're just like, ah, it's okay. I'll just let the wheels come off now because in January I'm going to restrict myself really, really intensely. So the first thing I think it's just a good thought exercise for people listening now is like look at the last 12 months or 5 years. Every single year you've gotten stressed, you've gotten sick. If you've got kids, your kids have gotten sick. You've had issues in your relationship. Work has been difficult. Life has been hard. And that's going to be the same this year as well. So just thinking like if then what framework. So if this happens, then what will I do? And kind of like the planning instead of feeling like you've been derailed again because you got sick or the kids, were taking up loads of time because of their issues or whatever, you can be like, okay, well, look, being honest, this is going to happen again. Of course it is. It's happened every year of my life. So why wouldn't it happen this year? So when it does happen, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And when things are kind of in this kind of orangey green light phase, like things are easier, then I will, do my two workouts
mhm.
consistently. So just thinking like that, first of all, is a massive thing for people. Like just because it's easy to be like, oh, things were okay and then I got sick but it's like you always get sick. So don't feel like that's gonna knock you off this time because if you have it like, oh, well, when I get sick, I'm not going to put everything out the window. I'm just going to like rest, not beat myself up. And then what I'm really going to focus on is once I start feeling a little bit better, I'm going to focus on getting back on the wagon as quickly as possible. So then that kind of 2 week illness doesn't turn into 6 months again. It's going to turn into 2 or 3 weeks and then I'm back on, which isn't going to make a difference when you're consistent over the course of the year.
Mm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing you were asking like specifically around like nutrition tips or what was the
Just kind
question
of
there?
like what have you just from your own experience, like what way are things kind of maybe not trending, or like what's been some of the main, like how have things changed over the last while in terms of where is the focus now in terms of just for good nutrition? Because obviously for a lot of people, like cost of living, that kind of thing, it's often looked at where healthy food is often expensive food, so they would maybe tend to cut corners around that. But like what have you kind of noticed from that point of view?
Yeah, so I think nutrition is a tricky one because it's very charged. Like people are very passionate. In particular, this can make it very confusing when you're listening to people online because it's like they're almost religious about what they're telling you to do. So
Mm.
like you shouldn't eat, if you eat meat, you're a terrible person, you're wrecking the climate and all these things. So like I try and keep away from like the extremes. There seems to be this war like meat versus vegetables online. It's very strange. Like it's not the meat or the vegetables, it's the highly processed foods is the issue
Mm.
that people seem to be struggling with. So like it's very hard to get, have issues with your weight if you're eating a lot of meat and vegetables. It's just calorifically very hard to do it. But hyper palatable foods, like if you give me Doritos, I can eat 10 packets of Doritos pretty easily. Like, So, so just to make it really clear for people, you don't have to be in a keto person, a vegan, whatever. And it's very tribal. So it's nice to be part of a community and be like feeling like you're in this group. But the way I do it with clients is we look at it's called the three lever approach, and it's from Peter Attia. He's written the book called Outlive. It was quite a popular book last year. And the three levers is basically you've got three levers you can pull from a body composition point of view. So lever number one is time restriction. Okay, so time restriction, it's like intermittent fasting. You
Mm-hmm.
restrict the time that you allow yourself to eat. So if instead of eating first thing in the morning all day until last thing at night, now you say, okay, I'm going to skip breakfast. I'm gonna eat from 12 until 8, so in that 8 hour window, and then I'm not going to eat outside of that time. Now, there's nothing magical about fasting, but what it does is it makes it just harder to eat as many calories in 8 hours as it did in 16 or 20 hours. So it works really well as a constraint. The second lever or constraint you can pull is dietary restriction. So instead of saying I'm going to eat anything in my diet, you might cut out part of it. So you might cut out meat, you might cut out dairy, you might cut out gluten products, you might cut out alcohol, you might cut out clearly refined sugar products. And as a result of cutting out something, a lot of times that will reduce your calorie intake as well.
Mm.
This is also a good thing to think about as well when you have like a red light food. So for me, if I have like loaded nachos, I will just abolish or I will obliterate that. Like I will eat two, three, four. I'll just go nuts, right? So that's a red light food for me. Like that's just something I know if there's not like it's just going to be eaten. So you probably have something like that as well, where you just tend to overeat this food when it's in your diet. So that's probably something that you might want to add into the dietary restrictive bucket because you can just put in something that maybe it's not as enjoyable for you, but you're going to feel better overall. You're not going to have all the shame or guilt of constantly overeating it.
Mm.
The last bucket is calorie restriction, which most people have probably heard of. You're basically counting your calories. So let's just say you track your calories, you weigh your food for like a week. You see, okay, I'm averaging like 2,000 calories a day or 2,500 calories a day. Now I'm going to cut it to 2,000 calories a day. And as a result of that, you create a calorie deficit and you lose weight as well. Now, the reason this works so well is that you don't have to count calories, you don't have to fast, you don't have to restrict anything from your diet, but you need to pick one of them. And that's the thing. So everyone is different, and some people hate fasting, some people thrive with fasting. Some people hate calorie counting, some people find it it's very good from a control standpoint, and it's the same with dietary restriction. So the tip is basically always pull one of those levers.
Mm.
If you're eating whatever you want in however much you want, at whatever time you want, you're most likely going to be struggling with your health and with your weight because there's too much junk food in your diet, it just in your environment. It's very hard to avoid it. And just to be clear, like this stuff isn't easy. Like if it was, we wouldn't have this issue
Yeah,
with
there'd be no
obesity and
crisis or no.
chronic health.
Yeah, and especially
Yeah,
yeah, and even this time of year, like, because it sounds as well, kind of Connors, that say the online influence that there can be that can play significant impact. Like you follow somebody and like they have their own gym or they're running their own business, and you're going like you're looking at the content they're sharing, but people maybe need to take a step back and realize, okay, this person owns their own hit gym. Of course, they're going to look like they're chiseled because that's the whole they're using that almost as a PR tool for themselves. So people need to step back and realize, oh, I'm not eating those. I'm not like you're comparing yourself to an extreme where these people could be professionals at it as well. Whether as you are working 9 to 5 and you have an hour maybe every day and you need to maximize that point of view rather than looking at them and going, I need to live like them. When if you wanted to live like them, you'd have to quit your job.
exactly. Yeah. And it's like a lot of, people in the fitness industry, like I love training. I train a ton, but I still don't look anywhere near as good as a fitness model. And a lot of these people have a very disordered relationship with food as well that you don't understand, but they look amazing on camera, or their sex drive is destroyed because they're so low on calories.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just trying to be realistic with like, play your own game, don't play someone else's game online. And it's really hard because you're looking at perfect looking people all day on Instagram now. So like it's not an easy game to play by just trying to keep in your own lane and focus on what you need. But yeah, that was a good point. Like just just setting the bar for what like compare yourself to where you are or where you were,
Mm.
not where some person on the internet is currently.
Yeah, and even like when they do you hear interviews with that would say if they're in the lead up to tournaments and those kind of things, food becomes a chore for them, and also that doesn't help from just the average person as well for motivation. Like even say like the experience you've had even dealing with clients, like how do you like how can someone say maintain that motivation and that consistency with their fitness routine? Because it's often a case of like say if they're going to be working out in the evening and they get home after a long day of work and then they realize they've whatever the workout is, they're like, I just won't do it today. Like how can you see them being able to? And again, it's linking to the fact a lot of people your clients, they're also very time restricted. Like how have you found from your experience are the best ways to, like you said, turn those 12 months into 24 into 36 rather than it being 4 months and off rate?
Yeah, it's coming away from the all or nothing. So a lot of it now in January, this is might be going on in your head as well, like who's listening. So like, okay, God, the wheels really came off the end of the year. I've gained 5, 10 kilos. I really need to make up for all this last time. I'm gonna push myself to the limit now over January and February and drop those 5 or 10 kilos and then I'll be in a good place. what tends to happen with that mindset, unfortunately, is it's just not realistic. You have a bad week, you can't sustain your 4, 5, 6 days a week, or your diet is too restrictive and you completely overeat and you binge, you restrict and binge, and then you've got loads of shame and guilt around that. And then as a result of that, you're like, oh, well, screw it. Like I've messed up again. That's a lot of the times as well. And you're back into that old cycle that has unfortunately probably been happening for a long time. So instead, what works much better is like what's repeatable, and it's very unsexy and it takes a lot of patience, but you want to just think about scaling your commitment. So if you feel like motivated to do 6 days a week, that's awesome. You can do that. But I want you to think about what can you still do on your hell week, which is what we always get clients to think about. So on your hell week, everything's gone to hell. Like everyone's sick. I'm stressed out of my head. Kids are sick. Traffic's terrible. Weather's crap. Economy's screwed. Like everything's going wrong. What can you do in that week? Ask yourself.
Yeah.
Not a lot, probably. That's your baseline. So that's what your baseline is now. And generally, it's about 2 15-minute sessions a week. That can be a walk for 15 minutes. Because what you want to think about is like, it's like a chain every week with your habits, and you want to keep the chain connected every single week of the year. So you can't keep the chain connected if the expectation is 60-minute sessions a week and following a low carb, zero sugar diet forever. But what you can probably do is scale it to a 5 to 15-minute walk twice a week on those difficult weeks and not be overly judgmental if the diet goes out the window.
Hmm.
Um, Stress eating is a thing. I stress eat as well. So that I think that's the biggest thing. It's never one thing you did that wrecks your progress. It's you not being able to forgive yourself for messing up in your eyes, which you're not actually messing up. You just set the bar way too high,
Yep.
and no one would have actually hit that. So that's the big thing, I think, is like we focus a lot on self-compassion in the program as well. So if people want to look up like Kristen Neff, Neff's work, she's well worth checking out. She talks about um basically self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness versus over-identification. So I can explain the three very quickly if you want.
Yeah, if you want to just maybe briefly,
Or
yeah, or like I suppose the best
yeah.
way, maybe if this is putting it into pressure, one-liners, if or is it possible to do it that way?
I think just the most important one is just common humanity. That's a really good thing for people to remember. Like when you do something wrong, you're not isolated by yourself doing it. There's literally millions of people making that mistake right now. So just realizing that you're not the only person that messes up, that's really helpful because then you can actually just forgive yourself and get back on the wagon much quicker. So that's kind of the most important nugget from that on that part. And just yeah, like recovering quicker. That's where people really are so harsh to themselves and they can't forgive themselves and they berate themselves and then they quit and then they wait for 6 or 12 months before they start again.
Like even say you would highlight as well, like sedentary jobs, like most of us tend to be in them now. Like, have you found, are there some desk-friendly habits maybe that people can adopt to stay active throughout the day? Because like I know from my own standpoint, I definitely sit way too much, and like people, you'll often hear the discussion around sitting is the new smoking. Like, are there any ways you've found to kind of where people, if they're in that kind of a job, they can maybe reduce the impact of sitting on their arse for that many hours?
Yeah, we focused a lot on environment is like the big thing we focus on. So a really simple, actionable thing people can do like right away is after every meal, go for like a 5 to 10 minute walk. So I love this. This is like a watch for people listening, and it's got a pedometer and a timer. Like so it does a countdown timer and a stopwatch and nothing else, no notifications or anything come in. So I'll just have a meal and then I'll just set that for 5 minutes. I'll walk for 5 minutes. Once it's bings, I'll come back and that's my 10-minute walk done. So it helps with digestion, helps clear your head. You're not going to be craving caffeine and stuff as much. It's also going to help with your productivity. So all of a sudden you've gone from zero to doing 2 to 3 10-minute walks a day. And then generally just do it early. That's always like the best thing to do. So, get up in the morning. Like a really good habit is to not check any technology
Yep.
for the first, if you can, for the first hour. But like if you're used to, and get your phone out of your bedroom. That's like the biggest, like I'm surprised with how many people ha like sleep with their phone. It's really high. And if you do, that's fine. But if you want to improve your energy and you don't know where to start, like it's technology. Technology is so tiring. So that first and last hour of your day, if you can have better boundaries around social media, you're going to feel so much better psychologically. And also you're going to feel way more energetic as well by just better phone boundaries. So yeah, they would be the kind of the big rocks that we focus on with people.
Yeah, I'm going to take your advice for the watch alone. Just having no notifications, that'd be good. One thing, and it was funny. I remember a couple of months ago that you sent out just an email in around it. What did you learn from? I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Bachata dancing. Is that how? I hope like because I remember you did an entire article in around your actual experience from practicing it for a year.
Yeah, it's funny you're asking that. So yeah, bachata dancing, it's like salsa. It's a Dominican, it's actually it's originally from Dominican Republic, but then the kind of modern, it's called sensual bachata is was created in Spain. So it's been amazing. It's been a really incredible experience because like this time last year I asked myself, what would I regret when I'm 80 or 90 if I hadn't at least tried it? And it was to learn a second language and to learn to dance. And as an English speaker, it's very easy to
We're
just,
lazy.
everyone will,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone will default to English because they want to learn or they already speak it and you can't speak their language. So that was the first one. And then the second one was dancing because I'm called like a movement coach. You'd have like bodybuilding coaches in fitness. I would be under kind of the movement category. But my movement isn't very good, like when I look at myself in comparison to a dancer. And I also felt uncomfortable if there was a social scenario where people were dancing, I would feel a bit like self-conscious about moving my body. So I wanted to get help with that. And I started doing Latin dancing last January. I was in the Canaries for 3 months. And then when I moved to Romania, there's actually a really big dance scene there as well. And it's been amazing, very humbling because I've started from zero. It's also given me a lot of insights into like a new client who's starting in the gym and they feel really uncomfortable. They feel like an idiot, like I'm doing everything wrong. Like, so one of the big insights for me was uh, the amount of self-judgment that was going on when I was dancing. I was like, oh, I'm doing it all wrong. I'm an idiot. My partner, she thinks I'm an
Everybody's
idiot.
looking at me. Oh no,
Yeah,
their phones
everyone's
are
looking
out.
at
Yeah.
me. Yeah. And then I realized it was like 3 months in, I was like, oh, no one's judging me. I'm just judging myself. Like, this is actually so hilarious, but also very helpful because anything I'm not good at, that inner critic is going to come out and be like, oh, you're doing it wrong. Da, da, da. Da. So that was really helpful. And now it's, yeah, a year in. Uh, again, like I might miss 2 or 3 weeks, and then I would go back to class, and it was really hard because it's also in Romanian, so like I'm not able to speak Romanian, so it was really challenging. And you feel like a complete idiot for the first 2 or 3 weeks that you get back, and then after 3 weeks, you're kind of back into the swing of it. So, just for people who maybe you're going to miss a few weeks, and it's easy then to be like, like there's more friction to restart, but you just need to kind of go through that discomfort for a week or two and then you're fine. Um, and now I'm very interested in the therapeutic benefits of rhythm and movement is very interesting. So I'm going to be kind of researching that more over the coming year. Um, that's a fascinating area that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it, but it seems the more I dig into it, like from an evolutionary standpoint, every culture has dance as part of their culture. It's a real, so anything like that, which has just been part of culture forever, is an interesting thing to explore, I find. And a great way to connect with people as well. So like I struggled a lot with loneliness in Australia. I was there for 6 years. I was working very like unsociable hours as a trainer. And then when I started working online, I was traveling, which was fun, but I was traveling very frequently. So going dancing with people like twice a week is amazing for like a sense of community, sense of connection, which I think a lot of people are also struggling with, is that kind of sense of connection or feelings of belonging. So yeah, a lot of people talk about BJJ as well. Like BJJ, people, it's the fastest growing sport in the world because people are craving touch and connection with other humans, even though that's like getting
It's a very,
strangled.
yeah, they say
And
it doesn't get much more connective with someone else than somebody
yeah,
literally sitting on you.
yeah. And that's like Ido Portal, who's like, he's, you know, the man, like when it comes to movement, that's exactly what he said. You know, people are craving human connection, and that's why BJJ is blown up. So I find it very similar with dance, like that kind of connection with a partner. You can also get very into like a flow state and become very present very quickly because you're completely focused on what you're doing in the moment because you're leading someone as a guy, and if you're a girl, you're being led. So you need to be really aware about where the person's trying to bring you. So no, it's been like I couldn't recommend it enough,
Mm.
but it's been really tough as well. But it's been a fantastic experience so far.
Yeah, I'd even love when you mentioned there kind of dancing in cultures. I wonder with regards to Irish dancing, given its restrictive nature, how that would help too. So, yeah, maybe kind of
Yeah.
to conclude the chat, like if you, like, what would be maybe if you had to give one really key bit of advice for somebody who maybe, yeah, especially this time of year, if there's anyone who's looking at, say, their fitness more, like what would be, I suppose, if you randomly met somebody in the street and they said, "Oh, I'm looking to focus on my fitness," what would you kind of tell them in that kind of a scenario?
Yeah, just like what can you repeat? Like that's what you focus on. So focus on what you can repeat and also don't focus on I need to do this and this and this. It's like what do you want your body to be able to do?
Mm.
So it's probably not to smash myself at the gym. It's probably like, oh yeah, I don't want to have neck pain at work or I don't want to feel like old with my kids. I want to feel like strong and capable and empowered. So train accordingly for that, but also make the training very accessible to show up and do each week. So it needs to be easy. It needs to be 20 minutes, 10 minutes, like, and just tick the box. Don't try and do it all in the next month. Yeah, so that would be be my advice.
Right, perfect. No, thanks again, Connor, for joining me. And yeah, if anybody wants to learn more, be it say the programs you provide, or even like the podcast as well, like you mentioned some of the guests there, and it's just like saving that. Like, where's the best places
Yeah.
they can find you?
Probably the website, conoro'sheafitness.com, or else on Instagram, you'll get that through the website anyway. It's at Conor O'Shea Fit.
Mm, great. No, thanks again, Connor. And yeah, sure, I'll look forward to chatting to you next time, wherever that actually happens to be.
Yeah, really appreciate it, man. Great to chat to you today.